Have you ever heard of a man who had everything? Power, money, fame, but was afraid of one thing that billions of people do without thinking. Marriage. This is the story of Richard Mason, the billionaire who wanted a child, not a wife, but just a child who would carry his name, his blood, his legacy. Before we dive into today's story, please like and subscribe to my channel to support me. Thank you. Richard Mason sat in his glass tower, the Mason Global headquarters. At 38 years old, he was one of the wealthiest men alive, worth over $70 billion. He had private islands, mansions across the world, and technology so advanced that governments secretly sought his advice. But in his private penthouse, at night, Richard's chest tightened whenever he thought about marriage. To the world, Richard was untouchable, the image of success. But behind closed doors, he whispered to himself, "Marriage is a prison. Marriage is betrayal waiting to happen. I will never let anyone trap me." Why? Because Richard's upbringing had carved fear deep into his soul. Richard was only 7 when his parents' marriage collapsed like shattered glass. His father, Edward Mason, was a steel-hearted businessman who believed love was a weakness. His mother, Helen Mason, was charming but unfaithful. Richard remembered the nights of screaming, the doors slamming, the smell of alcohol, and the endless arguments. One night, his father dragged him out of bed and said in a voice like iron, "Richard, never trust love. It destroys men. Money, power, control, that's what keeps you safe. Women, they will eat your heart alive." Those words stuck like nails in Richard's mind. And when his mother left, disappearing with another man, young Richard built a wall in his heart. He promised himself, "I will never suffer what my father suffered. I will never let love control me." Growing up, Richard saw society worshipping love stories, weddings, and romance. But in his billionaire circles, marriages were war zones, full of divorces, betrayals, scandals. He saw CEOs lose half their companies to bitter divorces. He saw friends trapped in unhappy marriages just to please society. Everywhere he turned, marriage looked like a cage. Richard was a man who lived for freedom. So when tabloids whispered, "The world's richest bachelor, why won't he settle down?" Richard smiled coldly and said nothing. But deep inside, the loneliness gnawed at him like a wolf. Despite his fear, Richard had one secret longing. He wanted a child. Not a wife, not a family, but just a child who would carry his name, his blood, his legacy. He would sit by the giant window of his penthouse, staring at the city lights, whispering, "Someone to inherit all this. Someone to continue the Mason name. But how do I get a child, without marriage?" That question became his obsession. Richard had thousands of employees, dozens of advisors, but only one man he truly trusted, Michael Stone, his head of security. Michael was ex-military, a man of few words, loyal to the core. He had saved Richard's life twice from assassination attempts. Richard trusted him more than anyone else in the world. One night, Richard called Michael into his study. The room was filled with the hum of servers, futuristic blue lights, and the faint ticking of a luxury clock. "Michael," Richard said, leaning back in his leather chair, "I need to tell you something no one else knows." Michael raised an eyebrow. "Yes, sir." Richard hesitated, his voice lower than a whisper. "I want to marry a robot." Michael blinked, unsure if he had heard correctly. "A robot, sir?" "Yes," Richard said firmly. "A robot. A wife who will never betray me. A partner who cannot lie, cheat, or leave. Perfection in metal and code." Michael stared at him for a long moment. Then he said softly, "And what about a child, sir?" "Robots don't give children." Richard's eyes darkened. "That," he said, "is the problem. And that's why I called you tonight. To help me solve it." Finally, he told Michael, "I will either create life, or I will die with my billions alone." Michael placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "Sir, whatever path you choose, I'll stand by you. But you must ask yourself, do you want safety, or do you want meaning?" It was midnight in the Mason penthouse. Rain lashed against the glass walls, lightning split the sky, and Richard Mason stood in silence, staring at the storm. Michael, his loyal guard, stood at attention. Richard finally spoke, his voice heavy. "Michael, I've thought it through. I cannot marry a woman. Marriage, it terrifies me. But I want a child. My blood, my heir, someone to inherit my empire." Michael's eyes narrowed. "And how do you wish to do that, sir?" Richard turned slowly, his face shadowed by the dim lights. "I want a woman to bear my child. But she must never know who I am. Not her, not her family, not anyone. My identity must remain hidden forever." Michael studied him carefully, then gave a single nod. "Consider it done, sir. I will arrange everything, and the secret will remain buried." The next morning, Michael began his mission. He moved like a ghost through the city, blending into the crowd, searching. Richard had given him only one condition. She must be beautiful, healthy, strong, someone whose genes will blend with mine to create an extraordinary child. Michael understood the stakes. This was not just a search for beauty, it was a search for destiny. For weeks, he traveled across the country, discreetly observing women without revealing his purpose. In cafes, universities, art galleries, hospitals, and even at charity events, he searched. Michael understood the danger. If this secret ever leaked, it would destroy Richard. Headlines would scream, "Billionaire hires woman in secret baby plot." But Michael was loyal. His mission was clear. Find the perfect woman, protect her identity, and ensure the child would be born into silence. One evening, Michael entered a quiet library, and that's where he saw her, Kate, a 26-year-old graduate student. She was breathtaking, with emerald eyes, dark flowing hair, and a graceful presence. But what struck Michael was not her beauty, it was her humility. Michael watched her for days, learning her habits. She was kind to strangers, disciplined in her studies, and carried herself with quiet strength. "She's perfect," Michael murmured to himself. But how do you tell a woman she's been chosen to bear the heir of a billionaire, without revealing his name? Michael was a strategist. He approached her carefully, posing as a recruiter for a special medical program. "Miss Kate," he said one afternoon, "we represent a private foundation interested in supporting exceptional young women. We can provide you with financial freedom, a lifetime of security, in exchange for one unique opportunity." Kate raised an eyebrow. "What kind of opportunity?" Michael leaned closer. His voice was calm and measured. "You would carry a child who will be destined for greatness. The father's identity must remain undisclosed, but you will be rewarded beyond imagination. You will never have to work again." Kate froze. Shock, confusion, fear, it all flashed across her face. "You want me to have a baby? For someone I don't know?" she whispered. "Yes," Michael said softly. "And you will never know him. But your future will be secured. No one will judge you. No one will ever know. Kate, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. You will be rewarded beyond measure. All you need to do is carry a child. The father's identity will never be known." Kate looked at him with disgust. "You want me to have a baby for a man I'll never meet? A man who hides behind money? No, I refuse. I may be poor, but I am not for sale." Her refusal was firm. But Michael was a soldier on a mission. Failure was not an option. Michael knew Kate's guardian, Mr. Godfrey, was a man who loved money more than morals. If Kate could not be convinced, perhaps Godfrey could. Late one night, Michael visited Godfrey's mansion. A leather briefcase stuffed with cash landed heavily on the table. Mr. Godfrey, Michael said calmly, this is just a taste of what's coming. Your ward, Kate, has been selected for something far greater than she understands. She will bring forth an heir to a man of unimaginable wealth. But she must never know his identity. And you will make it happen. Godfrey's eyes gleamed at the sight of the money. He licked his lips, nodded slowly, and whispered, consider it done. Days later, Mr. Godfrey tricked Kate into joining him for dinner at one of his restaurants. He poured her a glass of wine, but what Kate didn't know was that the drink was laced with a subtle excitement drug. Her vision blurred, her body grew weak. She tried to protest, but Godfrey smiled coldly. Moments later, Michael appeared like a shadow. Without a word, he lifted the weakened Kate into a waiting car and drove her to a secret, luxurious estate. And there, behind silk curtains and guarded doors, she met the man she would never truly know, Richard Mason. Richard looked at her, his heart pounding. She was more beautiful than he had imagined. At last, he thought, my heir will come. He never revealed his face fully to her. The drugs, the dim lights, and the orchestrated environment blurred her senses. When it was over, Kate was returned quietly to Godfrey's care. Richard stood alone in the shadows, whispering to himself, she will never know, but my legacy will live on. Months passed. Kate discovered she was pregnant. Confused and broken, she kept replaying that blurred night in her mind. Who was he? She whispered to herself. Why can't I remember? Why does my heart keep painting the face of a man I never truly saw? Though she never saw Richard again, she held on to an image of him in her dreams, an imagined face of a mysterious, powerful man who now lived in her heart. Meanwhile, Mr. Godfrey ensured she was well cared for, using Richard's endless money to cover every expense. To Kate, it felt like charity. To Godfrey, it was blood money. When the time for labor came, Mr. Godfrey called Michael. A black car arrived at midnight and whisked Kate to a private, secret hospital under Mason's control. Kate screamed in pain as the contractions tore through her. Hours later, she delivered a beautiful baby girl. But exhaustion overtook her. She collapsed into unconsciousness before she could hold her child. When Kate awoke, the room was cold, the lights dim. A nurse stood by her side, her face unreadable. Where's my baby? Kate whispered weakly. The nurse lowered her eyes. I'm sorry. Labor baby was stillborn. Quote, quote, quote. The words crushed Kate's soul. She let out a cry so raw it echoed through the sterile room. Her heart broke into pieces. But it was a lie. The nurse had already handed the newborn baby girl to Michael. He wrapped the infant carefully in a silk cloth and delivered her to Richard. Richard cradled the child, his eyes wet with something he hadn't felt in years, joy. My daughter, he whispered. My legacy. My blood. He turned to Michael. You have done well. It's better than I could have imagined. From today, you are no longer just my guard. You are my brother in this secret. He handed Michael a fortune and a command. Take the child. Relocate far away. Change your name, your life, everything. No one must ever trace her back to me. Not even the mother. Especially not the mother. Michael bowed deeply. Yes, sir. It will be done. Michael had obeyed his master faithfully. For 4 years, he had lived far away with the child, raising her under different names, different cities, and different worlds. Now, the girl, Priscilla Mason, was 4 years old. She was beautiful, with Richard's sharp eyes and Kate's gentle smile. But there was one problem. She couldn't speak. Not a single word. Doctors called it selective mutism. Michael returned her quietly to Richard's mansion and bowed. Sir, your daughter is ready to be with you now. Richard took her into his arms, his heart swelling with love. Priscilla, my little princess. Though she could not talk, Priscilla touched her father's face, and in that silent touch, Richard felt a bond stronger than anything he had ever known. Michael left once more, vanishing into the world, carrying Richard's fortune and the heavy secret of Kate's stolen child. Richard adored his daughter, but as a billionaire managing empires, he could not raise her alone. He needed someone who could give her love, patience, and care. So, for the first time in years, Richard made a public announcement. Billionaire Richard Mason seeks a private nanny for his daughter, Priscilla. Applicants must be kind, educated, and trustworthy. Generous salary and lifelong security are guaranteed. The news went viral. Thousands of women applied. Some wanted money, some wanted power, some just wanted to be near the world's most eligible bachelor. Among the applicants was a woman Richard never expected, Kate. Kate had never recovered from the pain of losing her stillborn baby. Every night, she dreamed of a little girl calling her mother. She lived quietly under Godfrey's watch, but she never trusted him again. When she saw the announcement, something stirred in her heart. A nanny, she whispered, staring at the headline. Maybe, just maybe, this child could heal the hole in my heart. She applied, never knowing the girl she longed to care for was her own daughter. On the day of the interviews, Richard's mansion was filled with women from across the world. Some wore expensive clothes, some brought fake smiles, and some even tried to flirt with Richard to win the job. Richard was unimpressed. He turned to Priscilla, who sat silently in her small chair, watching the woman parade before her like a strange show. Finally, Richard stood and made an unusual announcement. My daughter is the one who will decide. She may not speak, but she will choose her nanny herself. The room buzzed with shock. The women exchanged nervous glances. One by one, the candidates approached Priscilla. Some knelt and smiled. Some tried to give her toys. Others offered candy, hoping to win her attention. Priscilla remained silent. Her eyes were calm and unreadable. Then came Kate. She walked slowly, nervously, her hands trembling. She knelt before the little girl, looked into her eyes, and whispered softly. Hello, sweetheart. You don't have to say anything. You don't even have to smile. I just want you to know, if you let me, I'll take care of you as if you were my own. Something magical happened. Priscilla, who hadn't spoken a word in 4 years, suddenly reached out with her tiny hand, and touched Kate's face. Her choice was clear. She has chosen, Richard said, astonished. This woman will be her nanny. The room erupted in murmurs, but Richard silenced them with a wave. Kate had been chosen. By fate. By blood. By a bond that no one else could see. The very first day Kate entered Richard's mansion as Priscilla's nanny, her heart trembled. She glanced at Richard, his sharp eyes, his calm authority, his quiet charm, and something inside her stirred. Where have I seen this man before? She thought. Why does his face feel like a memory? But she pushed the thought aside. All she knew was that his daughter needed her, and that was enough. Kate gave her whole heart to Priscilla. She read her stories, sang to her, and stayed up through the night when she cried. Priscilla, who had never trusted anyone outside her father, clung to Kate with unconditional love. Then, one quiet morning, something happened that shook the walls of the mansion. Priscilla, sitting on Kate's lap, suddenly whispered her very first word. Mother. Kate froze. Tears filled her eyes. Richard, standing at the doorway, nearly dropped his glass of wine in shock. Priscilla repeated softly, Mother, Mother, as she wrapped her arms around Kate's neck. Richard's chest tightened. He had seen the impossible. His daughter, mute for years, had spoken at last, and her first word was mother. From that moment, Richard watched in silence as Kate and Priscilla grew inseparable. But something else was happening. Kate began to notice not only the child, but the father. Richard was different from other men. He was disciplined, humble despite his billions, and protective of his daughter. Kate found herself drawn to him. She tried in little ways, lingering glances, gentle conversations, and even moments of laughter, but Richard remained distant. He locked his emotions away, afraid of love, afraid of the very thing Kate unknowingly offered him. Kate would whisper to herself at night, "Why won't he see me? Why does he keep his heart closed?" Months later, Richard decided to do something special. For the first time ever, he threw a grand party for his daughter's birthday. The mansion was decorated with gold balloons, crystal lights, and hundreds of guests, politicians, celebrities, and CEOs. Priscilla, now speaking more fluently, was the star of the night. She smiled, laughed, and charmed the guests, but her eyes never left Kate. When it came time for pictures, Priscilla tugged on her father's sleeve. "Daddy, hold her," she said, pointing to Kate. The crowd chuckled softly. Richard hesitated, but Priscilla insisted. "Please, Daddy, hold her like a family." Reluctantly, Richard wrapped an arm around Kate. For the first time, the three of them stood together, father, mother, and child. The cameras flashed, the crowd murmured, and Richard felt something stir inside him that he hadn't felt in decades. After the cake was cut, Richard knelt beside his daughter with a smile. "Priscilla," he said, "make a wish, and I will honor it before all our guests." The crowd leaned closer, eager to hear the little princess's wish. Priscilla's eyes sparkled. She grabbed Kate's hand and placed it firmly into Richard's palm. Then, in a clear, innocent voice, she declared, "Daddy, make her my mother. That is my wish." The room fell silent. Gasps echoed through the hall. Kate's face turned pale, her heart racing. Richard froze, his chest heavy with guilt. The weight of his secret, the years of lies, and the child's innocent request crushed him like a storm. Guests stared in shock. Cameras clicked. Whispers filled the air. Richard Mason, the man who could buy anything, stood broken, because for the first time in his life, money could not protect him from love, truth, or destiny. Richard's chest was heavy the night of Priscilla's wish. The room full of guests stared at him, waiting for an answer. His daughter's little hand pressed Kate's into his own, and her innocent eyes begged him to say yes. Richard had two choices: break his daughter's heart and face scandal before the world, or surrender to love he never wanted. He fell to one knee. "Kate," he said, his voice breaking, "will you marry me?" Gasps filled the room. Kate's hands flew to her mouth, tears in her eyes. "Yes, yes, Richard, I will." The hall erupted in applause. Cameras flashed. Priscilla clapped her hands with pure joy. But behind Richard's smile was a plan only he knew. That night, Richard signed legal documents transferring 90% of his empire into Priscilla's name, keeping only 10 for himself. "If Kate betrays me like my mother betrayed my father," he whispered to himself, "she will never destroy me. Everything will belong to my daughter." But Kate, deeply in love, never cared about wealth. She cared only for Richard's heart and the daughter she adored like her own. One fateful night, what began as a tender moment turned into something more. Richard and Kate finally surrendered to each other, exchanging their bodies and souls in passion. As Richard held Kate close afterwards, his eyes fell upon a small birthmark on her chest, a mark identical to the one he remembered on Priscilla's mother. His heart thundered. His mind screamed, could it be? But he remained silent. The truth was too dangerous. Not yet. Months later, Kate gave birth to twin boys. The mansion erupted in joy. Richard, who once feared fatherhood, now held two sons in his arms, tears streaming down his face. For the first time, he felt complete. A daughter, two sons, and a woman who had brought light into his once lonely world. But the secret still haunted him. Years later, unable to silence his guilt, Richard secretly ordered DNA tests on all 3 children. When the results came back, his hands shook as he opened the envelope. The truth was undeniable. Kate was Priscilla's biological mother. The lie he had built his empire on came crashing down. That night, Richard sat Kate down in their private study. His voice trembled as he spoke. "Kate, there is something I must confess. Something I should have told you years ago. Priscilla, she is not just our daughter by choice. She is your daughter by blood. I stole her from you. I lied to you. I betrayed you." Tears burned his eyes as he fell to his knees. "Please, forgive me." Kate was silent for a long moment. Then she knelt beside him, took his face in her hands, and whispered, "Richard, you broke me once. But you gave her back to me. You gave me a family. And love forgives. I forgive you." Richard broke down, sobbing in her arms. When Priscilla heard the truth, she ran into Kate's arms, crying, "You are my real mother. I knew it. I felt it all along." Kate hugged her tightly, tears streaming down both their cheeks. "Yes, my darling, I am your mother, and I will never leave you again." Richard watched them, his heart swelling with a peace he had never known. From that day, Richard no longer feared marriage, or love, or family. The billionaire who once trusted no one found redemption in the very thing he had tried to escape. Richard, Kate, Priscilla, and the twins lived together in joy. Their mansion was no longer a fortress of secrets. It became a home of laughter, forgiveness, and love. And the world, once mocking him as the man who wanted to marry a robot, now admired him as the man who had found what all the money in the world could never buy, a true family. And so from a billionaire too afraid to love, to a child's wish that changed everything. The end. Thank you so much for watching until the end. Your time means the world to me, and I don't take it for granted. Every view, every like, every comment, they encourage me more than you can imagine. I pray that as you support me, God will support you too. May favor find you, may joy never depart from your life, and may all your dreams come true. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell to support my growth. Stay safe, stay blessed, see you next time. Bye bye.